embarrassing myself. What is the school background, Professor Drishta?
It is some background I put by mistake one day and I never changed it.
By mistake.
Yes, it was an accident.
Okay. Have we got Vismaya?
Where is Vismaya?
She has joined.
Oh, she joined.
Professor Vismaya, have you joined us or have you?
Hi, ma'am. How are you? Hi,
I can't see you.
ma'am. Oh my God. Wait, you can't see me.
No, I can see.
I can't see.
What color
is
am I
this?
wearing?
You're wearing blue and white.
Yeah, okay.
You
I
people
can't
have
see
made
myself
some-
either.
No, I'm sorry. Are you joking? I can't see her at all. There's a black screen.
Blue
No,
and
she's
white wearing. Background is blurred.
See, someone is saying, I also can't see. Simran. Who's that?
Guys, I also can't see this.
It is because my name is Drishti.
You know, I can't see myself either. This is so strange.
Bottle
But
of
I can see you.
water very close
Where
to
am I?
Vismaya, turn on the camera and turn it on again.
Yeah.
Do you want to leave the meeting and then join again? I also can't able to see. Shireen has joined now, is it? Oh. Shireen ma, you're expected to keep your camera on. Aren't you some convenient type person for link socks?
She is convener, ma'am. She is boss, but my camera is not on. So, Shireen, your camera will have to be on.
Finally, I can see you now.
We can see
I can
Vismaya.
see myself also.
Where are our student panelists?
Yeah, Roshana, Ramisha, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you put on your camera, please?
Can you see me, ma'am? Now.
No.
You guys, it's so adorable. Oh, there.
Is this in college, Roshal? No, ma'am. Weren't you in the same place when you interviewed me? I thought that was in college. No, ma'am.
Ramisha,
in front of you, Roshal?
Ma'am?
What is in front of you?
My, this is my window, ma'am.
Show no.
Room is very... I cleaned only this.
You cleaned only the back, so you're going to show us only the back. Such a chalu chapati, my God. Fine.
Is Ramisha there? Ramisha is not here.
She's here.
Okay, so we have, hi everyone. Sorry for that rather long beginning. This is the first panel discussion for the Linguistics Society Fest, Sʌmæntɪks. Yay! I'm sorry, my camera is not on because, yeah, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. So we have with us 5 lovely speakers. Our moderator is Professor Vijeta, who is the reason actually we're all here, because
I
she
gave
brought. She's no, that's not what I meant. She's the one who brought Machado into our lives and the husband Stitch into our lives. And she's the one who, when she speaks about books and words and everything, you just go sort of gaga over her. So this is big thanks to Vijay ma'am for agreeing to moderate. We have Rochelle, a student who is a writer and extremely sweet. She was, I think, one of the first people to submit the translation that we did of Machado. So we've been translating the husband Stitch into different languages, and we've had most of these people translating it, and I think Rochelle was one of the first people, so thank you, Rochelle. We have Professor Vismaya from Evening College. Vismaya is one of those people who every time she talks about a book, it doesn't matter if I've read the book, I fall in love with it. Because she speaks about it with such passion and such, I don't even know, such joy, and like sparks are coming out of her eyes and that sort of thing. So very excited to have her. Ramisha is another student who is once again extremely sweet, extremely kind, and I think was also one of the first people to submit the translation. So thank you, Ramisha. Just a Lona's joke. That's a good joke. And yeah, and Drishti, Professor Drishti Rakra is my colleague and very, very, very brilliant writer friend. She every time, so there's this one piece of hers I take to every class I teach. She knows which piece it is. It's about her reading, and the reason I take it is because I see in that piece like this thing about reading. Okay, my hand, and you should see my expression now, but I can't show it. So I see in that piece everything I want to say about reading, but don't know how to. But also, it's so beautiful. So I'm really thrilled to have these writers and readers here with us to talk about a story that we have all loved and continue to love and have now tried to translate, and now we can fangirl over it. I will shut up. Bye.
You're done.
Yeah, I said I'll shut up.
Okay. Thank you for that very soulful introduction to the panelists, Professor Shafali. In the name of full disclosure, let me tell everybody that the Machado fever began in maybe 2015 or 16 on a Halloween, October 31st, or a day after that. Professor Arulmani sent me this story on WhatsApp and he said, read. I started reading and then I stopped because I knew my life was going to change, but I didn't want it to change so fast. So I wanted to live normally and ordinarily for at least an hour before I could allow the story to change me completely. So I went and had lunch and slept and woke up and then continued reading the story. And needless to say, it did change. I know when people say things like your life is going to change, you don't want to believe them or you want to slap them. But when I say something was going to change, this something was very crucial because never before has a story knocked on the doors of your inner truth so ferociously that you felt compelled to pick up your pen or open your laptop and start writing. Even though the voice that you have is never going to be as lovely as hers, as Machado's, the 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 way she brings you so close to writing, I've never had that experience. No one has been able to make you feel like this is so good that, but it's also untouchable and very far away. So it's so desirable in a way that you can't touch it. But with Machado's writing, it's all of these. It's very far. It's very desirable. It's not easily touchable. But the core thrust of that story is that it's about writing, and if you have it if you want it enough, you will do it. It made writing seem possible. That's what was so exciting about it. Since then, I've taken that story successfully and not successfully to all my classes. I'm very delighted to share that the people that I've had most fun sharing the story with are all here today on this panel. Uh, Three of the girls who were in the same class took to the story so wonderfully that they did completely different things with it. Professor Shefali, Professor Drishti, Professor Vismaya, all three of them are here. They sometimes when I read this, when I read the story out loud in 2015 or 16, uh, to keep going, I need to keep looking at students' faces to know that something is happening, or if I'm not imagining that things are happening, that things that are happening in your body are happening everywhere else. And I saw Professor Shefali, who was shaking her legs quite uh, extraordinarily. She does that when she's nervous. But the thing with Shefali's shaking is that when her lower body is shaking, her face is abnormally calm. And I got scared, but then I continued reading. And then I saw Professor Drishti, who looked like um, someone else had the audacity to make the kind of joke that she does, which is a look of absolute terror and horror. And like someone had done something so unforgivable that she had no other choice but to forgive them. Um, Professor Vismaya looked like she she was in love, and also she didn't want to be in that love anymore. I've never seen two expressions so diverse on a woman's face at the same time. But that was how each of these women looked that day. Part of it is my own imagination. Part of it is because I remember exactly what the story did to them. The other two equally wonderful panelists, Ramisha and Roshal, young girls who are so committed to reading and writing that it's an honor to teach people like this who are so young and yet committed to writing and reading, and they took to the story just as well. I taught them the story online. I had no way of reaching out to them. But only a teacher who teaches online can tell how special it is that despite doing the story online, it has still touched the people in the same way as it did when I was doing this piece offline. Both Roshal and Ramisha immediately took to the story, even though it was done online. And I can always tell when it has moved people in a certain way. And I could say that for sure that that was the case with each of these four women. Uh, what we are doing here today at the panel is, even though the title says reading, discussion on the. Hi, Ramisha, we can see you. Can
Oh
you
God,
hear us?
finally. Can you
Hi,
hear me right?
I can see you clearly. Thank you. Okay, great. Uh, so what we're doing here is we're going to talk about Professor Shivali at one point during, I think, 6 months, 1 year ago maybe, reached out to some of us and said, we want to translate The Husband Stitch. How many of you would be interested? And some of us leapt and some of us jumped and said, okay, I want to translate. Needless to say, I still haven't translated the one page that she gave me with a lot of trust. And that's why I'm moderating this session, because I have nothing to say, but I have a lot more to ask. And I think these five women are the best people to ask about Machado at the moment. We are doing two things today. A, for those of you who haven't read The Husband Stitch by Carmen Machado, it's a short story. It's a horror short story. It's a comical short story about a girl and how she becomes aware of what it is that she wants. It's also a short story about a very simple love story. It's a marriage. It's about a woman getting what she wants. It's about settling down. It's about love and desire and everything. But here's the catch. It's it's also it's also a very cruel game Machado is playing with the idea of the short story itself. Because she's telling you multiple things, but she's also withholding certain things, and the reader can't fully trust her even until the end of the story. Um, those of you who haven't read it, the link is here in the chat box. You can go ahead and read it. But even if you haven't read it, I'm sure the panelists here will talk about it in a way that will make sure that even people who haven't read it will be just as included on this panel. So two things here. We'll be talking about what it's like to read Machado, especially the husband Stich. I mean, what is it? What does that moment do when you're reading her? Why is it that we have assembled here today online to talk about a woman who is so far away from us? What does her story do to all of us? Does it make us feel powerless or powerful, or does it seem to impact women more than men, or does it make us want to write? What is it that it does to readers and to writers? The second part of the panel will focus on the experiences of the panelists here who have tried to translate Carmen Maria Machado's short story to their own languages. So we have Punjabi, we have Tamil, we have Hindi, we have Konkani, which I was supposed to do, but sorted out. But I've done some lines. I might read it later. So uh, I'd like to begin the session by asking each of the panelists here, what is your readerly relationship like with this story, and how has it welcomed your writing? I'd like to begin with our student panelists. Roshal.
Hi, hi, ma'am. Ma'am. So I come from state board syllabus. So Machado was my first ever coolest story because we've only read short stories or moral stories. I didn't know there could be stories like this in academics, ma'am. So the first time I read it, I was mind blown. I was like, "Oh, such stories exist. Can this happen in college?" And this was the first story that was brought to class, and I fell in love with it immediately, ma'am. And I'm a very slow reader, but I sat and read the story in a stretch. I didn't want to stop. And then next class when Drishti ma'am came, I saw the ribbon in her hand. And I got even more excited, and I wanted to read, and I went back to the story because I'll be honest, ma'am, the first time I didn't understand some parts. So then I went back to the story and read it again, and I fell in love with it, ma'am. And then I was a Chetan person in Tamil Nadu. And this story, yeah, ma'am, this introduced me to more nice stories like, yeah, Machado, ma'am.
Here's a quick question for you, because you mentioned you're from state board and you didn't know that stories like these were also academic in nature. Uh, what kind of a relationship is it that you formed with this story? I also come from state board, so I I think I know what you mean when you say I can't believe play and work are the same. It's like that. So what did it do to your vision and your idea of what a story could be? Are there parts of the story that are memorable for you in some form?
Ma'am, I didn't know we could stress on details so much because something as simple as when we were walking, we held hands, our arms were tangled. I didn't know we could add so much details. I thought because I don't remember reading details as many as that, ma'am. So I thought that must bore the reader. Like the reader must get bored reading all that. But I was so into the story, and it was like a new form of writing and new form of reading, and it is like I discovered something new and big that day, ma'am. So that happened to me when I read Machado.
Thank you. Rimisha, you're on mute.
Yeah, you can hear me, right? Okay. So my experience with Machado was kind of similar with Roshal's. I'm from a ICSC board. So my understanding of love was very Shakespearean. You know, you can't. It's like you have to be fancy. Women pleasure. Oh God, not related at all. And I remember uh, when I was introduced to this piece. Okay, I want to read this line out because I just can't forget it.
Please, please.
Um, Here it's written: He spends into the dirt, pat, 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 patting like the beginning of rain. And I stopped there. I laughed for 30 minutes. And even today, I want to laugh at it. I never knew that. Okay, so like this was a piece that was brought to class. I was like, are we allowed to talk about sex so freely? I mean, what happened to the Gen Y generation? I mean, aren't our parents looking into this? I was like this, and I just could not. And then when I continued into the piece, uh, so there's this thing that Machado does. She gives you the voice. She kind of tells you how to read the story. So initially, when I started reading, that was bugging me a lot. I was like, let let me figure out what the speech is. I will kind of understand. I'll go forward with it. But she was giving the speech. But then when you move forward in the story, I thought that was very smart, and that kind of like shaped my reading. And here for me, the main character, she was she's a diva. She taught me that you have to like take first your stand, no matter with whom you are, what you are. Pleasure is important, you know. Like you do stuff, but you got to take control of your pleasure by your own self. Yeah, so that was my first experience of reading Machado. I hope it makes sense.
It does. It does. I'm so glad that you used the word pleasure. Okay, it's one, because it's very important, and B, because it's a great substitute for other things that we'd rather not talk about. But great. That was a very strong point you made there about the writer constantly interfering in how you're reading the story. Uh, it's an interruption, and in the beginning, it might seem a little like, when you're trying to focus on something and someone is standing right there, not letting you work, and you're like, why you're standing here? What is happening? Why are you here? Uh, but needless to say, it's interesting how Ramisha is able to point out that the thing that caused her most irritation was also the thing that she welcomed after a while. Let's move on to Professor Vismaya.
Good evening. Hi. Um, when I first read Machado, that was obviously when Vijayata ma'am brought her to our class. Like ma'am said, I was in love with her, but I was also very upset. I was so outraged that she could write such things and get away with it, because at that point, my only thing was to write things that were acceptable, right? And when I read it, I was so stunned. Like Ramisha pointed out, I didn't know we could talk about such things in classrooms. And every time I read the story now, I only read it in Vijayata ma'am's voice, because the other voices just aren't there anymore. Because this story now is more the story that Vijayata ma'am gave me, right? Somewhere it became all of the stories that she brought to class. What it did to my writing was very strange. I always had this need to write things with a happy ending or something with closure. I think Vijayata ma'am will agree that she was always messing with me and trying to get me to get out of this zone of needing a certain kind of closure. And Machado does that. She doesn't give you any ending to fixate on, right? She lets you think about what else, what is happening. And even towards I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but every time something happened in Machado's stories, it was like she was carrying me in her stomach, right? I was sitting there in Machado's stomach and seeing everything that was happening. And that was the only place I could sit in, because all the other places were occupied. Okay. And every time anything happened to the ribbon, my hand would go here, like, oh, oh no. Right? That was the thing. And even when Professor Drishti got her tattoo, I was so impressed, first of all, that she did this. And I was like very in awe of her. And I would be like, let me cover it for a minute, let me do this for a minute. And it gave me the sense of protecting my characters. If I wrote, I wanted to be delicate with them. I wanted to hide them. I wanted the reader to feel like they were within the character, able to protect the people that they are sitting within. And that's what it did. It was a very experimental style of writing that I'm trying to lean into. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you so much. Uh, the need for closure, I don't know if it's resolved or what, but I'm glad that you made that point because we'll be returning to that shortly. Professor Drishti?
Hmm. Okay, I'm wondering where to begin because um, speaking about this story, talking about what it did to me, means also talking about how my life changed after I read it. Um, I still remember the bench where I was sitting. I remember I remember looking at the projector, looking at where you were sitting in class and how you were reading it out. And I remember thinking to myself that my life is never going to be the same. And it that moment hasn't come back to me very often. Maybe it's come back in Ferrante, maybe sometimes Sally Rooney, but it's a very intimate experience to have a woman's voice in your head and for her voice to be so loud that your own kind of disappears. And it, I mean, I remember thinking that okay, now I can do whatever I want, and feeling like there are no more boundaries anymore. I can write what I want, I can feel whatever I want, and it doesn't matter whatever shape this takes. Can I speak about my tattoo for a second?
Of course. Why
So
did you here?
so I mean, for those who don't know, I got a tattoo of a green ribbon last year, and like all permanent things, I had to explain to my mother and a lot of other people why I'm getting this tattoo. And that conversation was one I had to have again and again because I needed to explain to them why I would want something like this in such a visible part of my body, which is like my wrist. So I had to summarize it because my mother was never going to read the husband stitch. She wasn't going to be patient enough to try and make her way through it. So I told her that there's this woman, and in this world, all women have a ribbon around one part of their body, and and this woman, she gets married to this man and she really loves him, but he really wants to know what that ribbon is doing on her body. And so she was like, she got super interested and she said, okay, then what happens? So I said, they live together, they have children, they have a very nice happy life, everything went well. But then, in spite of all of the happiness she was giving him, he couldn't stop focusing on the ribbon. So so I told her this, and then I said that I mean, he just didn't listen. Like, the child got married also, everything happened, but then as in he grows up, he goes to college. What other language do I say it in? So after the child grew up, both of these people, this husband still was very fixated on the ribbon, and then towards the end of the story, he just unties it and her head falls off, and she was just shocked, and she could not believe that her head would have fallen off, and so there was lots of confusion. So then I told her that see, this basically refers to, how all men just want to know everything about women's lives and they don't want women to have secrets. And she said, yeah, men are horrible. That's all. She moved on with her life. So that one line was kind of enough to explain to her why this was important. And after that, she didn't seem to need more explanations, even though I did a very bad job of explaining the story to her or trying to tell her. I mean, this is not the reason why it stayed with me, but it's the only thing that would make sense to her. But the story is also large enough, it does enough things for you as a reader to take whatever you want from it. So at the time, I might have taken away something as a writer, as a young person who was just discovering herself, all of these things. But it also kind of expands itself into different languages for whichever woman might need it, even though she might have not thought of these things before. Yeah.
It's really lovely, especially how you took Machado to a Punjabi home and basically Give them a Jimmy Shagil version of
Yeah.
what happened in the husband stitch. Ribbon comes off, head falls off. That's great. One thing that I found interesting in your response to the husband stitch is that you said that it sort of gave you permission to do anything, that things became possible after this. Um, this is some kind of permission that I think all young people are looking for in their lives. We're waiting for it, but we don't really know we are waiting. It's like waiting at the wrong platform for a train and being told that it's the wrong platform, but you continue waiting there. So this permission bit is very interesting in terms of what we do with it once we get it. Because we didn't realize that we needed it to begin a chapter in our lives. But then it's also very easy to forget what life was like before we got it. Uh, what have you done with this permission? What have you been able to do?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, and the panel in general also.
So should I go later or?
No.
Okay. I wrote with it. That's all. It sustained my writing till now. I mean, not that I'm writing as much as I should be, but for the a couple of years after, I mean, the story just shaped my degree, and all of the writing I was able to do, all of the passion that it created in me was from here and nowhere else. Like it could be from other writers, it could be from, I don't know, lots of places, but it came from here because um, after I read this, I was just excited by the possibilities of the stories I would be able to tell one day, and I recognized something in her writing that um, felt, I don't know, um, very chaotic, something that I'm still not able to define. So I think every time I write, I'm still chasing that possibility that she opened up for me, because I know I haven't reached it yet, or I haven't reached the threshold of whatever she was able to do. Yeah.
Professor Ramesh, Ramisha, what about you?
Yes, ma'am. So, I remember when the first time I read this, and the only thing that I realized was I have a liberty. I have a liberty to speak about anything that I want. And soon after that, in Vijeta ma'am's class, she gave us a prompt that was a cloth line. And
Clothesline. What was it?
cloth line.
Clothesline. Okay, okay.
Yeah, she gave us a prompt, and she gave us, and she told, do whatever you want to do with it. And I read Machado quite recently, and I wrote a poem on it. And I don't know if ma'am remembers this, and this happened very involuntarily. I wasn't even thinking straight. So one thing that was bugging me about the clothesline is, even in my house, whenever I walk to the terrace where all the clothes are hung, my dad's or my brother's underwear would be like in the center, like some trophy. But no matter how nice or how much I spent on my bras or anything, it would be beside the corner. That used to bug me, and wrote a poem on that. And I named my brother's underwear as Purushottam, and my black satin bras. Why am I speaking so much? As Lacy Casey. And ma'am asked me, why did I name him Purushottam? And I was like, I don't know. And then I realized, okay, so maybe somewhere in my head I was, Purush Uttam, like being superior. Yeah. So this is something that Machado did to me.
Oh my God, Ramisha, you absolute terror. You know, just 2 weeks ago, I passed by a shop. It said Purushottam Stores or something. And I kept thinking, why is this name bugging me? Why is this name bugging me? And now I've realized, what the hell is wrong with you? Yeah, that's great. But okay, I think we have to take 5 minutes to recover from what Ramisha has told us. But you people recover and I'll structure the timeline in my head. Okay, this is what she's told us. She took the prompt, went to the terrace, saw all manner of unappetizing delicates that belong to certain people, and then she wondered why it is that the more appetizing delicates were hung on the other end. Decided to write a story, and it's amazing that she called it Purushottam. And uh, this is what writing is. That people could be sitting anywhere in the world and saying some very sanitized things about Christmas cheeks or lovely, I don't know, turnips or potatoes or whatever. And we'd have people like Ramisha who take that story in their body, walk to their terrace, and say, screw all of this. I am my own Machado. What the hell is this underwear doing right in front of my face? And they'll do something with it. There's also power of writing in some sense. And I'm so happy to hear this story and really, really so indebted to you that you would share this with us. Uh, would you mind reading this poem out for us?
Oh my God. Oh, okay. I'm, I shared a lot with it. Okay, just give me 1 second. Let that out. I posted this on my Instagram, okay? And the people, they weren't even interested why I wrote about this. They were like, why did you call him Purushottam? And a few people were like, do you hate Purushottam? What's the name bugging you? I don't know. Okay, I'll just speak the poem. I wrote it. Yeah. Um, the legs of the black trouser walk hastily with the wind. Papa's blue shirt hung collared up on the center wire. A pink kurta and a doodle boxer waved at the sun. But my lacy Casey drooped at a corner above the drain, her straps dangling dead from underneath a chiffon dupatta. The bold and sexy Casey had charmed every man with a wink. Tom and Harry had killed for a glimpse and held me tight on all those drunken nights. Now the queen was veiled. I hushed Purushottam, the underwear, who was sunning above the orchids. Lacy Casey was crowned at the shrine. Above the purple, under the blues, her black satin shone like a bride.
Beauty, beauty. If this is what it gave you permission to do, then I wish this permission never leaves your body and that you continue writing like this about Purushottam and Purushottam's delicates and his hardwares or I don't know, anything and everything. That's brilliant, Ramisha. Thank you very much. Professor Vismaya, what did Machado's story give you permission to do?
Right. Um, I come from a home where everyone knows everything. If I cry in the bathroom, someone in the kitchen will find out. If I'm doing something very shady in the kitchen, someone in the bedroom will know, right? So in a home, it's just my mom, dad, and me. And everything I do, everyone knows. If I buy something new, everyone knows. If I write something, people know. If I turn on the light at night, someone will know. So in a home like this, everything of myself I had to share with other people, right? I'm sure it was the same for my parents as well, but they had this boundary that said, I'm your parent. I don't have to share everything I do with you. But from when I was young, I had to share everything that I did, including my journal, my socks, the hole in my sock, everything. So when I read Machado, she gave me, or the story gave me permission to hold myself back in relationships. It gave me permission to not share myself with people. She gave me permission to say, I don't want to tell you how my day went today, right? It was so liberating to say that my life right now is my own, that I want to have dinner alone. I want to have, say, this hole in my sock and I want to keep it. My mom also has this habit of going through my clothes. If there's a tear in something, she'll rip it and throw it away. Right? It's a very normal family thing to do, where if there's any hole on any kind of a comfortable t-shirt, it's gone. I mean, I know it's a very silly thing, but everything of mine belonged to someone else. my stories, my dreams, my horoscope, my palm reading, whatever it was, everything someone else knew. So for me, reading Machado was taking back everything I'd given to others, like collecting myself from other people and putting myself back together. And once I did that, I could write. I could write about myself. I could write about other people shamelessly, say, no, I don't want to give you privacy, but I will keep mine. I know that's shameless, but I enjoy this freedom of being this way. That's what she did for me.
Very delightful to hear for younger and older women, any age, size, whatever. And also younger men and older men, any age, size, whatever it is. We're not often taught how to withhold ourselves when we also want to be head over heels in life. So what we learn is some of us, I think, don't even want to withhold. It just happens. It's a necessary lesson, I think. So thank you for bringing that to the table today. Roshar, what about you? What did you get permission to do?
Ma'am, I don't know if you remember, but in one of our introductory classes, you asked people why they write and what they write. And when my turn came, I said, ma'am, I don't. And when you asked me why, you said, because I haven't experienced any pain in my life. Yeah. And I remember you laughed at it, and then you introduced me to Agents of Ishq, ma'am, and you asked me to read it. And the next week we started classes, and that's when we read Machado. And you told me, ma'am, you told, see, you read these stories. Are these people going through pain? Is something bad happening to them? Like, do you see it? And then when I read these stories, I started writing, ma'am. Like Professor Drishti said, these stories gave me permission to write itself because I thought I was incapable of writing. I thought nobody will read my story. I've not had a breakup. I don't cry in my bed the whole night. So nobody's going to read my story. So reading Machado gave me the part, not, I won't say part, the freedom to write, ma'am, about simple things, about ordinary things, about Amma, about my little brother and things, just freedom to write, ma'am.
It's lovely. This is great also because that's a wonderful point Roshar has made. So often we think that this tragic thing should have happened to you because people find writing about tragedy, readers find writing about tragedy so rewarding sometimes that it's as if you wonder sometimes, what do I do with all the joy I'm also feeling? Is it not possible to feel tragedy and joy at the same time in one body? Uh, that's so what Roshar is pointing out is also the fact that uh, how we define ourselves as writers or as artists, and how difficult it is for some of us to go that mile and declare ourselves to the world that, this is me and this is what I like doing. And how tragedy sometimes gets involved in between and keeps interrupting. Have you never had a breakup? And as Vishal pointed out, I've never cried in bed. Can I write about other things? It's great that Machado's writing is giving people permission to write about joy because God knows the world needs it more than ever before at the moment. Uh, that was 2 rounds of what I had in mind for the panelists. I'm inviting the listeners at this moment and the watchers and the voyeurs on the chat box to ask us questions. Please direct all your questions to the chat box if you have any questions. Would anybody on the panel like to read out the translation that they've done of Machado's short story? Let's see, Professor Drishti. I'm waiting to know what Machado sounds like in Punjabi.
But I did Hindi.
Did Hindi? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know Punjabi. Did Ramisha also do Hindi? Okay, do we want the students to read it out? Then I can.
Why don't you read it out first and then we'll take it from there.
So, one of my problems is that the part that I was translating is very PG-13, maybe more than that. So, I'll just look at one small paragraph. Should I explain? Should I copy paste the part I'm going to read out in English?
Is it PG-13?
Yeah. I found one small paragraph.
Wait, PG-13 is the good one. I mean, I can't wait. Is it the what does PG-13 mean? Is it the
I mean, it was. I'm not reading out any scandalous parts.
Ah,
I will just read out. I'm pasting it in English.
paste it in English. This is nice. Paste in English, read in Hindi.
Okay, I just want to warn everyone that it's a terrible translation. But I had fun with it, so I'm not apologizing for it. Okay. Should I also paste the Hindi, or do you want me to share my screen, or should I just read?
Share your screen. Those of them who know.
Okay. 1 second. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what I will be reading out. Just this much. वह खिड़की के बाहर देखता है, मैं भी देखती हूँ. उस अंधेरे में कुछ भी हो सकता है. भूत प्रेत. I don't remember what this word was, so we'll go over it. एक आदमी ऐसा जिसका हाथ नहीं, अंकुश. एक बूढ़ी औरत जिसको बुलावट आया बच्चों की मंत्रों का. इन कहानियों को सब जानते हैं, मतलब सब सुनाते हैं, लेकिन कोई विश्वास नहीं करता. उसकी आंखें पानी की ओर मंडराती हैं, फिर मेरे गर्दन की ओर. अपने फीते के बारे में बताओ, वह कहता है. कुछ कहने को है ही नहीं, मेरा फीता है. क्या मैं छू सकता हूँ? नहीं. मैं छूना चाहता हूँ, वह कहता है. नहीं. झील से एक जीव तड़पते हुए बाहर उछल आता है, वह आवाज की ओर मुड़ता है. मछली, वह कहता है. एक दिन मैं कहती हूँ, मैं तुम्हें इस झील और इसकी जंतुओं की कहानियाँ सुनाऊंगी. Okay, that is what I will read.
Lovely, Drishti. This is so nice.
Okay.
You know, also because wait, show the screen again. Show me your screen
Yeah.
again.
Sorry, one second.
I had no idea that the word for ribbon in Hindi was
Pita.
Fita. Or pita.
Pita. This
Pita.
one.
I didn't know. That's
I
really
had no idea. Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, it was really fun.
How did you find this word out?
I had to Google it. I kept asking my mother for words, and she just didn't have the patience for me. So I had to just keep Googling lots of things. So I had a transliteration website open with me because I also wasn't able to type in Hindi, and I had a English to Hindi thing. A lot of it. So after I finished translating, I actually went and I started reading a little bit of Hindi short stories because I was very kicked by just reading in Hindi. And I realized I could have done a lot more with some of the phrases. But yeah, it was really fun. It was very exciting.
What I particularly liked is that, you would imagine that story like Machado's, which is part horror, part multiple things. If it were translated in Hindi, it would read very much like Ahat's background.
Yeah.
When you said उसकी आंखें पानी की ओर मंडराती है फिर मेरी गर्दन की ओर, it's a lovely line. It sort of implies horror, but there's also so much romance in that line. So
Yeah.
I have to appreciate the translation.
Thank you. But I think this was all just Machado. Like, so when I say I could have done more with it, I should have actually changed the syntax of some sentences because the Hindi calls for different shapes. But I didn't want to do a lot of that. Another thing that was slightly odd is that all of this is in present tense. I'm not sure how much of that works well in Hindi. But I mean, it was just like one excerpt. So I continued with it. I didn't want to change that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rosha, do you want to share your Tamil translation? It'll be fun to have Hindi and Tamil. No, all these people who are saying Hindi imposition, blah blah imposition, put Hindi and Tamil together and read Machado. Best imposition.
Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
Yeah, sure, take your time. So Professor Vismaya and Rimisha, I have a small other task for both of you. Not a translation one, but a very direct kind of question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to ban mode now. Doing Machado, it seems. Yay, poya, yo. Someone should take away his phone. 80 people are liking it also.
Ma'am, can I tell you one small detail? Yeah. So like ma'am said, I also sat with my amma to translate it. And my part was when they were getting into the I don't know what's the word for it. So I was telling each line, and Amma was helping me translate it. And then I got to one point. I was like, Amma, no, I'll do it myself. And then she was like, "Well, what happened? What's wrong? Show me the story." It's like, "No, ma, no, ma, no, ma." And then, and then she said, "You do know that I gave birth to 2 children, right?" And then. And I just wanted to say, from then on, I started discussing stories that I read with Amma. And she also started reading books like Love Hypothesis and all, ma'am. Yeah, just wanted to tell that.
Thank you. I would have felt very betrayed if you hadn't told us that.
Ma'am, I'm not able to share it. Is it okay if I read one part, ma'am?
Just read it. Just tell us which part so we can quickly copy paste it here on the chat box, the English one.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, I've always been a teller of stories. That part, ma'am.
Which she's a teller of many stories. I can't quite remember which. Candle one, the graveyard.
Ma'am, the potato one, ma'am.
Potato one. Okay, potato. Can someone quickly post the potato bit here on the chat box? The toast potatoes.
Yeah, is this the toes part exactly?
Toast, the supermarket one.
I got it. Yeah.
I'll start, ma'am.
Yes.
நான் எப்பொழுதும் கதை சொல்பவளாக இருந்திருக்கிறேன். நான் ஒரு இளம் பெண்ணாக இருந்தபோது மல்லிகை சாமான் கடையில் இருந்து என் அம்மா நான் என் கால் விரல்கள் மாட்டிக்கொண்டது என்று கத்தினேன் என்று என்னை வெளியே அழைத்து வந்து விட்டார். அங்கிருந்த பெண்கள் கவலையுடன் பார்த்தார்கள். உருளைக்கிழங்குகள் கால் விரல்கள் அல்ல என்று நாங்கள் வீட்டிற்கு வந்த பின் அம்மா அதட்டினார். எனது அப்பா திரும்பி வரும் வரையில் எனக்கென கட்டப்பட்ட நாற்காலியில் என்னை அமர சொன்னார்கள். ஆனால் இல்லை, அந்த ருசெட் கிழங்குகளுக்கு கால் வீரர்கள் வெளிர் மற்றும் ரத்தம் தேய்ந்த ஸ்டாம்புகள் கலந்திருப்பதை நான் பார்த்தேன். அவற்றில் ஒன்று நான் என் ஆள்காட்டி விரலின் நுனியால் குதித்து பளிக்கட்டி போல் குளிர்ச்சியாக இருந்தது. மேலும் ஒரு கொம்பின் போல் என் தொடலுக்கு அடியில் விழுந்தது. இதை நான் எனது அம்மாவிடம் கூறிக்கொண்டே இருந்த பொழுது அவர்களின் கண்ணம் பூனை போல் வேகமாக மாறியது. நீ அங்கேயே இரு என்றாள். அன்று மாலை என் தந்தை வேலையிலிருந்து என் கதையின் அனைத்து விவரங்களையும் கேட்டான். நீங்கள் திரு பான்ஸை கண்டீர்களா இல்லையா என்று என்னிடம் கேட்டார். அந்த குறிப்பிட்ட சந்தையை நடத்தும் முதியவரை பற்றி. நான் அவரை ஒருமுறை சந்தித்திருக்கிறேன் என்று சொன்னேன். திரு பான்ஸ் ஏன் கால்வீரர்களை விற்கிறார் என்று என் தந்தை கேட்டார். அவர் அவற்றை எங்கே பெறுவார்? இளமையாக இருந்தாலும் பிணவரைகளை பற்றியும் இறந்தவர்களை பற்றியும் அறியாததால் என்னால் பதில் சொல்ல முடியவில்லை. மேலும் எங்காவது கிடைத்தாலும் என்று என் தந்தை தொடர்ந்தார். உருளைக்கிழங்குகளுக்கு மத்தியில் விற்பதின் அவருக்கு லாபம் என்ன? அவர்கள் அங்கு இருந்தார்கள். நான் அதை என் கண்களால் பார்த்தேன். ஆனால் என் அப்பாவின் விளக்கத்தினால் என் சந்தேகம் வெளிப்படுவதை கண்டேன். I think I'll stop here.
This is beautiful. I don't know at this moment if I'm most smitten by Machado or you or your Tamil reading. It's just did. Thank you very much. Now I can't. I mean, I can't. I think that's also the power of Tamil. It just fits. It just fits. I didn't quite realize that it had never occurred to me to think of or to listen to Machado's story in any other language. But I think Tamil comes really close, and it's almost as if English is now very kaka in front of Tamil. Uh, thank you very much, Roshal. Uh, was it more like a song when you were translating this in Tamil?
Uh, no, ma'am. I think, but it made even more sense in Tamil. I got even more connected when I did the story in Tamil, ma'am. I think maybe it's just because of home, ma'am. Yeah.
What bits were difficult?
Oh, ma'am. Okay, so in English, when she says, "I dig my nails into his thighs," you get the meaning of it. But when I translated it in Tamil, I was not able to bring the meaning, and I wrote something very simple, ma'am. So I wanted to do a good job with that part, but was not able to do the literal translation. And to be honest, I didn't know what pantyhose meant in English also. So to find that in Tamil also is a little hard, ma'am. Yeah.
You didn't want to call it Lady Purushottam or something?
Yeah, maybe, ma'am. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Wow. Okay. Uh, very quickly for Professor Vismaya now. Uh, tell us, you told us how you carried Machado into your writing life as well as your personal life when it comes to relationships and etc. etc. I remember you taught Machado to a class. What is it like teaching Machado?
Every time I take Machado to class, I'm very afraid because I don't know how the students will respond to it. Um, and most of the time, I'm feeding off the energy of my students. So when I take this piece to class, I'm very afraid that they will not like it, right? Because I mean, I'm a very shameless person. I will say a lot of things. But with this story, I hold it so close to my heart that I want them to like it, that I really want them to enjoy reading it. So I took the story to class. I made students read it. I made them try out these different voices. And I didn't get anything from them. We couldn't complete the story in that class because there was a lot of discussion happening. And then I went back home and then I opened my Instagram, WhatsApp messages. And most of my female students in that class had sent me a message like gushing about the story. And it made my day. They were so touched that they could read something like this in class. And some of my students, they have children, they are married, so they know the struggle of trying to keep parts of themselves secret, of trying to hold on to themselves. I don't think I just took this to 2 or 3 classes and all of them responded so well. I don't think I taught anything in that class. In fact, the next class I went to, they were telling me about their lives. They had opened up. It had become like this channel that a new communication line had opened up and we could talk about things. Like Rochelle said, you could talk to your mother after, about a lot more things about the stories you read after sharing the story with her. That's what that experience was to me. It was a pathway that just opened up between my students and me.
Must have been kind of intimate, no? Was there a, when you said there's a big pathway that opened between you and your students, you know, that moment when you know that you have something special with a class or with a student or with students, and there's always a before and an after moment. So you walk into a class after that has been established. What is that like? What does it do in the classroom for you?
It's like we had a secret. So these girls messaged me, and I didn't acknowledge these messages individually in class. I just said, I'm glad that the response was great. But none of my other students, mostly the boys, they didn't know what we were talking about. And it was like this secret that we shared. So every time I'd walk by, they would look and then they'd smile and they'd giggle or they'd look that side or this side. So knowing that we had this secret kind of a relationship outside of what we were doing in class, it was a little scary because it was so much trust I was putting into them and so much trust they were giving me. And it was like I had to protect this. I mean, I know I keep saying I have to hold the green ribbon like this, but this is also something I want to hold like this and keep it very safe. And this also led me to write a little bit about these secret boxes that we all have, and I'd written something about it. I have this secret box of perfumed oils that I don't let anyone see or touch or use. It is my box. And when I spoke to my mom, I realized she also had a secret box full of bindis that she'd never use, that she doesn't let anyone use or touch. So even if I take one sticker out of it, she'll make me put it back by the time I get back home. And most of these women, this other woman I met, she has this secret box of movie tickets that she'd gone to without her mom knowing because going to films isn't allowed in her home. So all these secrets that we so closely treasure, this relationship that I shared with my students became something that I keep in that box.
I don't know why, it's making me blush very much. It's very sweet. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
A certain thing we've noticed in what both one thing that we've noticed in the accounts of both Roshal and Ranisha, the thing about what it's like to read this in a classroom. Um, so it's like this, because the one thing clearly that maybe as students you will tend to get distracted by is how much of the things that you're generally not used to reading about, especially in classrooms, is there in the story. The references to physical intimacy, the references to marriage, the references to sexuality, etc., etc. Uh, it's like this, but if we keep ourselves permanently distracted by that, then we forget that the magic is happening somewhere else. That throughout this whole thing was just a distance. I'm talking about this very specifically in the case of a classroom, since the context of the classroom is what all five of us have in common at the moment. Uh, so it's very easy to get distracted by it and to lose out on the magic that's happening everywhere in the story. It's like we keep thinking, if there are no adults at home, what will we do? And you keep thinking, no, that's going to be the best day because I'll go and touch my mother's door. It'll be some stupid thing like that. Or I will go sit on my grandmother's bed. Or I'll go and stand on top of the terrace and scream loudly. All the things that you think you will do the day that adults are not at home. And finally, when you're given the freedom and you go do it, and it's like such a low because you thought it would mean something, but it doesn't mean anything. But maybe on that good given day when adults are not at home and you're able to do something that completely thrills you, that's looking at that point of magic in Machado's story. So I wanted to ask you, Ranisha, what was the magical part of Machado's story for you as a reader, apart from the non-state port type things in the story?
Mm, okay. So actually, there was one part that really stuck me, and there was one sentence that was very beautiful for me. So the part that I really liked was actually the part that I got for translating. The part where it's a Halloween night and the kid is dressed and she asks, "What are you?" And she says, "I'm your mother." And that was just that I really loved that part. And there was this another line. I'll just read that out. Just give me 1 second. Um, yeah, here she says that stories have this way of running together like raindrops in a pond. I have never thought of it this way, and it was just, this just stayed with me. I can't put it in a better way. Um, yeah. So I tell don't think I'm answering the question, but I want to share something about the translation. Okay. So when I got this translation task, I was obviously in love with Husband Stitch. But then I came to know that I have to translate it in Hindi, a language that I'm comfortable with. And at that time, I was seeing this guy who writes in Hindi. He writes songs and stuff. So I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna translate such a beautiful writing in Hindi, and he'll be like very impressed, which he did not. But yeah. So for Machado, when I read her, the first time when I read, I got a freedom. But the second time I read, translating it, I found a voice. I I discovered a voice that I never knew existed, and maybe that was the magic. Now, uh, the guy's no more in my life, but writing in Hindi is still there. Some days when I feel when it's raining, when I'm listening to some song, I don't believe the same girl who used to cry to read Hindi, or the same girl who in 11, 12 was like, oh my God, I can't read Hindi. Who reads Hindi stories? The same girl writes in Hindi now. So maybe it helped me find my voice.
Such powerful things are being said on this panel. It's both unsettling and very putting together at the same time. Thank you, Ranmisha. Especially what you said about people not being there in the life anymore, but they gave you so much more in their exit than they did in their presence. That's always my favorite story to sit and listen to. Thank you. Uh, a moment of magic that I look forward to when I take this story to class is, yes, what it does to girls. It is completely, it's unnerving how much it does to the students in the classroom, especially girl students. But for me, the magic happened one day with a boy, and it was completely unexpected. I was doing this piece in a classroom, second CPE. I had Shireen reading out the narrator's role, and I had a boy who is as unwilling can be, who bunk classes, never pay attention, gave me misery after misery. Ritvik, he was reading the husband's part. And for a boy who hated writing and hated classes, he did that role. I mean, he narrated the husband bit with so much charm that I wondered for a moment if he'd taken to that story and he was perhaps able to see something that I wasn't able to see. And that kind of ulta pulta magic is always very sweet to witness. And that was a very fascinating moment of magic for me, because I'm used to what happens to girls with it. You all are all evidence of it. But for the first time, I was seeing what happened to a boy. I don't know what caused him to volunteer and say, I will read the husband's part. I don't know if it was because nobody else was, or because he was bored, or whatever. But I'll never forget what it did to the way I saw him after that. So I'd like to close the panel here at the moment to reflect on the things that each one of us have brought here. Eventually, what Machado's story does is return us to our best versions. Even though it feels like it's always in the making, it's always something actually in the past, not the future. So, and I'm so glad that all of you who shared these versions with us today. Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you also to Professor Shefali, who organized this and thought of this panel and thought of putting this together. Shefali, are you here? Are you staring at my picture?
Hi, ma'am. I'm here. That was beautiful.
Would like
So
to
many ways.
know about your magic moment with Machado. And meanwhile, if there are any questions, listeners, please leave your questions here in the chat box. I feel like such a radio jockey when I say listeners. I'm sure you can see us. Leave your damn questions in the chat box.
Ma'am, Shireen says you have to read a little bit in Konkani, which is true.
Actually, okay, I'll read it and let me get ready for it. Professor Chef Puff, do you want to tell us your magic moment with Carmen Machado? Meanwhile,
So, okay, first of all, I'm sorry my camera is not on once again. But, okay, so I have this theory that all stories are actually just stories about stories. So all stories are metafiction. But the moment when I thought of this theory was reading Machado. And my other theory is that all stories are actually fairy tales. And you all know how I am about fairy tales. And so for me, the magic came from realizing that writing was about finding multiple stories around you, but also sort of dragging something within you and like pulling it out. But in the most harsh and gentle way in the world. I remember reading the story, and I also remember like just where I was sitting when the story was being read. And at one point, I stopped staring at the screen and stared at Vijayata ma'am because I liked her way she was reading the story. And it's something that it's this moment you don't forget that that stories can be about stories, writing can be about writing. That meta is happening, even though it's Linksock. And
Okay.
yeah, and that was very precious for me because the story I finally sent to Iowa was actually a metafiction story. And yeah, and it was because doors like this were opened for me when I saw that things could be done that weren't a traditional sense of story. Yeah.
I'm not going to cry tonight, so don't make me cry. But thank you for sharing that very delightful trivia with us. Uh, uh, the bit about what Professor Shafali said about the possibilities of multiple stories existing. Uh, I see that there are no questions, so I'm just quickly going to read out the bit that represents what Professor Shafali just pointed out about multiple stories existing. So in the story, Machado tells us various stories about women who become wolves, women who lose their mothers, women who go to the graveyards, women who see potatoes, girls who do all of this. My favorite one is the story about the girl who enters a graveyard because her friends told her that she won't be able to. I'm going to read it out in Tamil. Professor Shafali will have to forgive me because this is not the part that I was supposed to translate, but this is the one that is most easily accessible. Konkani, for those of you who are not familiar with, it doesn't have a script. Okay, it's a loser type of language. In a classroom, it would be one Papa first bench student sitting and wondering why everyone is cooler than them, but it's actually the winner. But no, I'm joking. It's sad because it doesn't have a script, but it's also funny. Uh, this is the bit, Dishti, if you could post this, there is a story they tell about a girl led by her peers to venture. From there till she died, being right was the third and the worst mistake. Okay. एक क तसा एक चल्ली बगे तिक तनी स्मशाना पेटेत आहे तनी तिक सांगले स्मशाना भितर कोणी गेल्लारी तुम्ही वापस येवेश नाही म्हणून ती सांगली ना मग वची जोत्ता आणि गेल्ली ते सांगचे तिगेले फर्स्ट मिस्टेक आसिल्ले सेकंड मिस्टेक ती एक चेल्ली म्हणून हांव तुका दाखयतली ती सांगली तांणी तिका एक तेस्काती दिल्ले आणि सांगले ते वचून ते ग्रेवयार्डा भितर घाल ती सांगली जायत हांव कोण पळयतली म्हणून ती स्मशाना भितर गेल्ली तेस्काती घेतली ताजे वयर रबली आणि ते तेस्काती भितर गेल्ली कसकी जल्ले तेवढी तिगेले अंगाला बग्गे कसकी जळलेले तिगेले अंगाला वयर ते चाकू आशिल्ले आणि ती तेची पळोवन बसली सकाळी येताना तिगेले लगी आशिल्ली दोस्त पुरा येयली ती तांणी पुरा तिगेले मेल्लेले बॉडी पळयन सांगले ती आताशी मेल्ला की कशी मेल्ला म्हणून ते अर्थ जायना बरी लगून मेल्ली की ती करेक्ट आसा म्हणून ते सांगून प्रूव्ह कोण मेल्ली की ते सांगच्याक आमकां कळना जाल्यार आमकां आतां कसा कळटा म्हळ्यार ती सम आशिल्ली ती करेक्ट आशिल्ली ती रायट आशिल्ली आनी हे तिगेले मिस्टेक आशिल्ले दिस इज अ व्हेरी English/Konkani version of the translation. But what I like most about even translating it in my mind right now is how suddenly emotional Konkani makes things, even things that are not supposed to be emotional. And this is also my big complaint with the language, that what appears to be very funny in Kannada can become hilarious in Kannada only. But in Konkani, it becomes like Mother's Day kind of vibe, and that's the biggest problem with this language. I prefer Kannada, and I wish I could have translated this in Kannada. Has anyone translated this in Kannada, Shefali?
Yes, ma'am. I think we have a Kannada translation.
Who?
Let me just check. I can't find my email. I will let you know.
Please do. It would be superb to have this in Kannada as well.
Yes, of course.
Question
Definitely.
for Roshal from Professor Ankuna, who says, "Thank you for this lovely panel. My question is to Roshal, who translated it in Tamil. Do you find that it kept becoming slightly poetic when you began translating the not so PG-13 parts? I want to know because I fully felt like, why are you translating?"
Ma'am, I'm glad ma'am asked me this question because that is exactly how I felt. Because there's one part in English where she says, I surrender myself to him. When I translated it in Tamil, I used the word sʌmæntɪks. Sʌmæntɪks is it's a very sacred, holy word, ma'am. So at that part was really nice. Even though they were very naughty, in public, when I wrote sʌmæntɪks in Tamil, it got very, very sacred, very holy, like, ma'am. So I really enjoyed doing it in that part in Tamil. I loved it, ma'am.
Thank you, Roshal. Currently, Shireen has translated it in Kannada. Why won't you read it for us, Shireen, and switch on your camera also? Can she hear us? Is she able to communicate
Yes,
with us?
ma'am, I can hear you, but I read Kannada very slowly. So I can send it. Can someone else read it?
I can try, but wait,
Okay.
try. I mean, just 2 lines.
Oh, ma'am, I'll stutter a lot and then I'll only get annoyed with myself. So I'll send it.
I'll read it.
Sending it.
Meanwhile, if there are other questions, please post them on the chat box. I'm a very bad Kannada reader, apparently.
I had a question. Can I ask?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so to everyone, whoever did the translation, whoever would like to answer, because it's my personal opinion and I wanted to know that. So after doing the translation, and so that kind of, made us aware with the language again. It was like a reunion kind of thing because we all did our mother tongue, our language in school, and then it kind of broke off, and English headed up everything. So when I did the translation, and I was like, okay, I got back to Hindi. So now when I read it again, I feel that when I was writing it in my mother tongue, I tried to make it, sound very intellectual, very safe. Like the thing when I read a Hindi writing, I always imagine it happening in the 1950s in a village kind of thing. And when I read English, I imagine, yeah, it's in New York, it's 2022, people are on Snapchat now. So, do you feel that when you were translating it, you kind of made the story that way as well. And now, if you would be given a chance, you would try to make it more casual. I feel that.
Drishti, why don't you take this? Translate it in Hindi.
My experience of it was a little bit different. So I completely get what you mean when you say that if you're reading it in Hindi. I mean, I read only Hindi short stories in school, so there was always some irritation. You were reading it in the voice of a slightly older Hindi teacher. Um, but when I was reading it now, I found that that version of myself didn't exist. And I was actually very excited about translating it, because when I was translating it, um, I was reading it as someone whose mother tongue is Hindi, which is usually not who I am. So it felt almost like a different version of myself was able to read it. So the thing about possibility that I said, so it was different in the sense that now it was almost like I was discovering a possibility in a new language, because I think that modern thing was happening on its own. So that trouble I didn't have, um, but the other problem was also that because I don't usually read too much Hindi, I'm very sure that it's not literature the way it should be. So there's that, definitely that reworking needs to happen. I don't know if I've answered your question, but
We have a question by Yasmini. Says, have the panelists encountered people who completely rejected the story, as in they were scandalized or distressed by it or something, or they just didn't like the story style and form? All the time, I have. But see, in two versions. One is that if they get distressed sometimes because there are no trigger warnings. But that's I'm done with your trigger warnings, so I'm not saying anything about that. But yeah, they want trigger warning. I say trigger warning, and then I read the story, because what I really care about is the also the impact it has on people who haven't had very delightful or pleasurable experiences with the things that the story talks about. But they return to pleasure. I'm more invested in pleasure and how it can rescue those who haven't had the opportunity for it. Those who have been not, there's also a general dislike to the form itself, which I encourage, because I don't think the unanimity of love for Machado should stop us from also not talking about what it is that people don't like about it, and that always happens. But the other problem to this is also that you take any long story to class, people will rebel. So how seriously can you take it? But let's ask the other professors, Professor Vismaya, Professor Drishti.
All right. I have encountered students who don't like the story, but I think it's mostly because they don't have the patience to read it, or they don't want to talk about these things that make them uncomfortable. I don't think anyone's been scandalized or extremely troubled by what's happening in the story. It's just, I feel that they weren't ready to put in that time to know what this woman is talking about. Um, Nothing too outrageous. I keep using the word outrageous today for some reason. I don't think there was any hatred towards the story in that way. It was just they weren't willing to give it the time that that their classmates did.
Mm. When I went to Delhi for my masters, I imposed this story on everyone I knew, and again very unanimously. Although not all, but some of the women took to it beautifully, but with the boys, it just didn't stick. And some of them who were friends of friends, they got very angry at why the story was written, what the writer was trying to do, things like that. I mean, it was just very funny to hear, because I mean, let them be angry, they can keep their anger, but yeah, so keeps happening.
We have a question by Akansha. I don't know if this is stupid, but since so many mother type questions, mother type, what is mother type conversation also happen?
Mother tongue.
How would the panelists explain Machado to their mothers in their mother tongue in 2-3 lines? Okay, Roshal, you gave us the opposite experience. You said you told your mother not to read the rest of the story, but if you have to explain Machado's husband Stich to your mother in your mother tongue, say it in Tamil only. I think the world is just dying for you to speak in Tamil.
Okay, ma'am, I actually did tell her the story in 2 to 3 lines. I said, அம்மா பசங்க எப்பவுமே அவங்களுக்கு மட்டும்தான் ப்ளஷர் இருக்கு, அவங்க மட்டும்தான் என்ஜாய் பண்ணுவாங்க, அப்படி பேசுவாங்கல்ல. இந்த ஸ்டோரி வந்து இந்த ஸ்டோரி வந்து கேர்ள்ஸோட சைடும் காமிக்குமா, எப்படி கேர்ள்ஸ்க்கும் ப்ளஷர் இருக்கு, கேர்ள்ஸும் எல்லாம் என்ஜாய் பண்ணுவாங்க, அப்படி காமிக்கும். What I told her.
Girls enjoy Ponnango is the best line. Thank you. What about you, Lady Purushottam?
Oh my God. I didn't actually think about it. I didn't talk about the story with my mother. I think I should do that.
If you had to, how would you say it in Hindi to her?
Say it in Hindi.
2-3 lines describing what husband Stich is about to your mother.
Okay. So, yeah, I would just tell her that, Mummy, why can't I switch to Hindi? See, Hindi is not coming out of me.
Let's begin with Mummy.
I have tried to. So I don't know, ma'am. I'm stuck. I'll get back to this.
Ismail, Kannadದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿ.
My Kannada is very Kannada English. Okay, so I'll pretend that you guys are my mother and I'll say it. Okay, stop it, Vijayata. Okay. ಅಮ್ಮ ನೋಡಮ್ಮ ಇದೊಂದು ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ವಿಜೇತಾ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಗೆ ತಂದ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತಾ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಒಂಥರ ಆ ಥರನೇ ಇದೆ, ಬಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ನೀನ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಇದ್ರೆ ನೀನ್ ನನಗೆ ಹೇಳು, ನಾನು ಹೋಗಿ ಅದು ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ಗೆ. ಏನಾದ್ರು ತಪ್ಪನ್ನಿಸ್ತ್ರೆ ಏನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಮ್ಮ, ಈ ಹುಡುಗಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಫನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಳೆ ಆಯ್ತಾ, ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಬಟ್ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ಳಿಗೆ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಸಮ್ ಸೀಕ್ರೆಟ್, ಅದು ಅವ್ಳ ಹಸ್ಬೆಂಡ್ ಬೇಡ ಬೇಡ ಅನ್ನೋ ಹಿ ವಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಟು ನೋ ಎಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದೇನೋ ಸ್ಟಿಚ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ನಿನ್ಗೂ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರ ಆ ತರ, ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ದಿಸ್? And then I'll tell her a little more about the story. Then I'll use it as a way to pry into her life, because my mom's a very mysterious person. I don't know enough about her. Then I'll say, ma ಹಂಗೆ ಏನೇನೋ ಆಗಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ರಿಬ್ಬನ್ ತೆಗಿತಾನೆ, ತಲೆ ಬಿದ್ದೋಗತ್ತೆ, ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೋ ನನ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಮ್ಮ, ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಓದ್ತೀಯ ನನ್ ಜೊತೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ?
Very innocent act also, on top of everything.
Yeah, I don't tell her too much.
Like, how can I open this lollipop? I don't know, please teach me. Ama. And in the middle, dragging me and throwing mud on my beautiful name also.
The thing is, my mom is a very shameless person, but I want her to start being shameless. Then I will also be shameless, like that. But she, I think, connected a lot with this idea of holding on to secrets as well. She found that very relatable.
Ramisha ji, क्या आप तैयार हैं?
Yeah. हाँ, तो मतलब I grew up in a Muslim family, and my mom also learned all the ethics of being a woman. So I would start like something like this कि मम्मी आपको पता है आज हम क्या पढ़े क्लास में? And she would be like, what? I'm like, आप जो बचपन से पढ़ते आए हो कि सिखाया गया है कि आपका पति हर कुछ है, you can't, मतलब आप सीक्रेट नहीं रख सकते. I read a story that defies it, or I read ke I can have pleasure on my own, and that's very important, and I got freedom. See, I again switched to English. I just can't speak Hindi. So yeah, I would say something like this in Hindi.
You know, Agents of Fish did a cool experiment long ago. They wanted to know what pleasure is called in your mother tongue. And people found it very difficult to analyze and find a word for. I mean, there'll be like words like suk and book and things like that. They're very random words. Nothing that can give the dignity of pleasure to these words. But I think that's also why we find it so difficult to talk about. I mean, why you found it so difficult to stick to Hindi when you were talking about pleasure. And this also makes a good case for why what sometimes our own Englishes can do to our own ideas of pleasure. But that's a whole other panel. Thank you very much. It's 1.5 hours of Machado, but I think I took away a lot from all of you panelists and the students listening here. Thank you very much, Professor Drishti, Professor Vismaya, Roshal, and Ramisha, and Professor Shafali for organizing this panel. This is the first ever Lingals panel, and I'm very thrilled that this was about Machado. It makes perfect sense that Lingals will do something with Machado, seeing as how much of language there was in today's panel and what languages can do to our ideas of pleasure. It is very humbling, Shafali. Thank you very much. And I wish your camera was on so I could finally catch you doing what I always accuse you of doing. But this is splendid. Thank you very much. It's a great start to Lingals and Sʌmæntɪks, which is our linguistics society's first ever fest. Professor Shafali will tell you a little more about the events that we've organized for you guys. Professor Shafali.
Hi everyone, I'm Cameraless again. Okay, I'm also voiceless apparently. Yeah, so tomorrow we have one second. We're having a book. Oh God, what's happening to words? Sorry, it's all you guys and I blame all of you. We're having a book sale tomorrow. We're also having some MA games. We are having a short series of presentations by people on languages which people may not have heard of, and we're also hoping Arusa will have a workshop. And over the next few days, we'll be doing more fun things, and we'll do some antics. And
can you tell us about the workshop? Some students want to know.
Oh yeah, so Sir said he'd do a workshop on word games now. On word games. So it's Arusa. So I don't think anything else has to be said. Like it's Arusa. That's my headline.
That's okay.
And so it'll be lots of fun, and you'll learn a lot. And I'm also going to try and get into it because I want to learn. But thank you so much for this beautiful panel. I'm covering my face now, and I don't know why I'm doing that. But it was so lovely listening to the five of you speak. And thank you for agreeing to do it, for doing the translations, for speaking, for all the beauty that happened today and every day. You're all five amazing boss women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye all. She didn't send me the Kannada translation, but